Did you know that in 1919, the entire city of Boston was hit by a tidal wave of molasses? Yes, you heard that right. A sticky, sweet, 25-foot-high wave of molasses, moving at 35 miles per hour, crashed through the city's north end. This bizarre and tragic event is known as the Boston Molasses Flood, and its story is far stranger and more shocking than you can imagine. It all started on January 15th, a surprisingly warm winter day. In the heart of Boston's bustling commercial district stood a colossal steel tank, 5 stories tall, holding more than 2 million gallons of crude molasses. This tank belonged to the Purity Distilling Company, which used the molasses to produce industrial alcohol, a key ingredient for munitions during World War I. The war was over, but the demand for industrial alcohol remained high, and this tank was filled almost to capacity. For years, residents had complained about the tank. They heard groaning and rumbling sounds coming from it. It leaked so much that local children would collect the sweet drips in cups. Company officials dismissed the concerns, even painting the tank brown to hide the leaks. They were rushing production to beat the coming prohibition laws, and safety checks were an afterthought. They were, quite literally, sitting on a ticking time bomb. Just after noon on that fateful day, witnesses reported hearing a sound like a machine gun, a rapid fire, popping of rivets, followed by a deep, terrifying roar. The massive steel tank failed catastrophically. The structure tore apart, releasing its entire contents in a single, unstoppable wave. The immense pressure sent shards of steel flying like shrapnel, slicing through buildings, and even shearing the supports of the nearby elevated railway. But the real horror was the wave itself. A viscous, brown tsunami engulfed everything in its path. It was so powerful that it lifted buildings off their foundations and crushed them. It swept up wagons, horses, and people, tossing them around like toys. The wave's immense density made it incredibly destructive. Imagine being hit, not by water, but by a thick, heavy syrup that moves like a freight train. Escape was nearly impossible. The air immediately filled with a sickeningly sweet smell that would haunt the city for decades. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos. The molasses was waist-deep in some areas, a sticky, suffocating quicksand. Rescuers waded into the goo, desperately trying to pull out survivors. The cold January air began to thicken the molasses, making the rescue efforts even more difficult. People were trapped, their cries for help muffled by the thick sludge. Horses, unable to free themselves, struggled in the mire. It was a scene from a nightmare. One of the first on the scene was a crew of 100 cadets from the USS Nantucket, a training ship docked nearby. They ran into the mess, pulling people to safety. Police officers, firefighters, and Red Cross nurses soon joined the effort. They worked for 4 long days, wading through the sticky, dangerous debris field, searching for survivors and recovering the bodies of the victims. The initial rescue was a heroic, yet horrifying, task. Every step was a struggle against the suffocating grip of the molasses. In the end, the flood claimed 21 lives and injured over 150 people. The victims ranged from a firefighter crushed by a building to a 10-year-old boy who was simply playing in the street. Entire families were devastated. The stories of the victims are heartbreaking. A mother and her child swept away from their home. A worker, on his lunch break, caught completely by surprise. The human cost of this industrial disaster was immense. The cleanup was a monumental undertaking. It took over 87,000 man-hours to remove the molasses from the cobblestone streets, the buildings, and the harbor. Firefighters used saltwater hoses to try and wash it away, but this just spread the sticky mess further, turning Boston Harbor brown. For months, everything in the city was sticky. Doorknobs, telephone receivers, streetcar seats. Everything had a layer of molasses on it. It's said that on hot summer days, 4 years afterward, the north end still smelled faintly of molasses. So, what caused this disaster? The official inquiry and subsequent court cases revealed a story of corporate negligence and greed. The tank was shoddily constructed. The steel was too thin and brittle. It was never properly tested for leaks before being filled. The company had rushed its construction without consulting an engineer, eager to start production and cash in on the high demand for alcohol. They cut corners at every turn, and the people of Boston paid the price. The legal battle that followed was one of the longest and most complex in Massachusetts history. For years, the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company, which owned Purity Distilling, tried to blame the disaster on anarchists, claiming a bomb had destroyed the tank. But the evidence was overwhelming. Expert testimony proved that the tank had failed due to structural defects. Finally, after a massive class action lawsuit, the company was found liable and forced to pay out settlements to the victims and their families, a landmark case at the time. The Great Molasses Flood had a lasting impact. It led to a wave of new regulations and government oversight for construction projects across the country. For the first time, architects and engineers in Massachusetts were required to sign and seal their plans, taking personal responsibility for their safety. It was a wake-up call for industrial America, a brutal lesson that putting profits before people has deadly consequences. Today, if you visit the site in Boston's North End, you'll find a small, unassuming plaque commemorating the tragedy. Most people walk by without a second thought. But the story serves as a powerful reminder of a day when a city was brought to its knees by a bizarre and deadly wave of sweetness. It's a strange, forgotten chapter of American history, a story that is as unbelievable as it is true. It shows us that sometimes the most mundane things can become instruments of disaster, and that the fight for public safety is an ongoing battle. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.